Welcome back to Restless. It seems like it's been a while because our
Greetings.
topic is history.
Classic Father Joseph quip.
Full of
Yep.
jokes, yeah. Yeah, so our topic is history, and we'll just dive right into history because it's a topic that I think is something we can really unpack for a while. It's something that I've been thinking about a lot. Maybe it's because I turned 40. And
Congratulations.
thinking about my
You're
history.
officially prehistoric.
Yeah, well, I was born in the 80s. Like I was born closer to World War II than today is from 1984. Right?
Well, this is the 80th anniversary of D-Day
Right.
coming up.
So I was born, 39 years away from D-Day
right.
or something, and we are now currently 40 years.
Okay,
away
it's
from
not from the
D-Day.
start of the war, but from
Not from
D-Day.
the start of the war, right, but
D-Day
from the
in
end of the war.
particular. Yeah.
It makes you realize that we have a very short place in history. I mean, I've seen a lot of historical things happen in my lifetime. September 11th. It's all comes to mind.
Anything else? Anything else?
John Paul II.
No, I was gonna go with John Paul II.
Well,
Tuesday.
also the fall of the Berlin Wall.
I was only six, but yes.
The dissolution of the Soviet
Soviet Union,
Is
sure.
that what it's called?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the technological changes we've seen, my goodness, the rise of the internet, which has changed all of our lives.
The
And,
iPod. Let's not forget the iPod.
That was an earth-shattering invention, which I still use one, by the way.
You
Do you really?
I do.
No.
I do
I have
for my car.
so much respect for that.
For
I
my
have so
car.
much
Yeah, I
respect.
actually bought a new one from China. Well, used from China.
Nice.
That's typically Chinese.
Okay.
Yeah. Is it
Works.
actually Apple branded? Like it's
Oh,
an
no.
actual Apple? No, it's a fake
It's
one.
an MP3 player.
It's an MP3 player.
It's not
Okay, I
actual
see.
iPod, yeah.
I see.
That's too bad. Got to get the real stuff.
I don't think they make them anymore, do they?
No, they haven't made the iPod Classic in, I don't know, 10 years or something.
Right. So I don't have
9
an
years?
iPhone, and I need music in my car, and it doesn't have a CD. I just got a new car, and it doesn't have a CD player.
Ah,
So
yes.
I don't know what I'm supposed to do other than get an MP3 player. So I got one.
Yeah.
Gave away all my CDs.
Can't you load music onto your fake smartphone?
I think I can. Yeah, I think I can. But then it gets slower, to use it. But
I see.
This is what the people are here for.
random,
yeah.
random fact for you. This has nothing to do with anything. But I sold my old car to
Yeah.
our producer's son.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
makes that.
Steve Lee's
My
son.
my son's only one.
I know. Wait,
Not
wait,
you, Steve
Our,
Lee.
our
guy who
Our
our
executive
proprietor. Our
producer.
proprietor.
producer. That's right.
Yeah.
The guy who pays your salary.
That's
that
true.
guy.
Yes.
That
yeah,
guy.
yeah.
Yeah. Not
Yeah.
doesn't need a car yet.
no.
He's
I mean,
1
it's
year
good to
old.
start
His son
early.
is 1 year
It's
old.
good to
Yeah,
start
yeah,
early.
yeah, yeah.
Walking's probably the next step.
Yeah, I know.
He walks
He
already.
skips walking
That's
straight
true,
to
yeah.
driving. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Driving is
that's right,
mom
one.
crazy. But anyway, so I was thinking about history. First of all, are you history buffs? Do you like studying history, learning about history?
Yes.
No.
All right.
No.
Good.
Well,
All right, that's
nah,
fair, that's
I
fair.
mean, I didn't. I certainly didn't have an interest in it growing up.
Prior to this episode,
Yeah, well, no, I mean, like most other things, I think that I actually just didn't have a huge interest in learning until basically until I reverted to the Christian faith.
Are you
And then
serious?
yeah,
You
well,
weren't a good student, or?
I mean, no, I was. This isn't to toot my own horn. I would say that I was naturally bright and made my way through and got out of there as fast as humanly possible.
That's fair. That's fair.
And then realized that education was important and regretted my lack of effort.
Mm.
So.
But now he's working on a master's degree. So
Yeah. So
in
now
theology,
the
not
answer
history.
is yeah.
There's some
But
history that
there's-
goes
yeah.
along with
Yeah,
theology.
and
It really
exactly,
is. Yeah.
Right. So
Actually,
so,
I would assume quite a bit.
yeah.
Not that
Absolutely.
I've never
Yeah.
taken
I mean, I would
theology.
say it's
Constantly.
intrinsically connected to most of the stuff.
Well, because this
I
is a
mean-
big topic, but I think God reveals Himself through history.
Oh yeah.
I
mean,
not
and-
only
and
in the
if
Old
you-
Testament, but even in the New Testament.
Right. And the development of doctrine through history and how it countered heresies through history and so,
Right.
So
right.
anyway.
But you are a history fan.
Yeah, I was major fan of History Channel growing up.
Okay.
It's actually true, and this is the point in probably the early 2000s when all History Channel played was World War II
World War
things.
II, right? The World War
Just
II channel.
all
That's what
World
they
War
used to
II,
joke about.
which
yeah.
actually started another channel on like the expanded cable, which we didn't get until I was much older, which was the military channel, which I think is gone now. But that was basically an entire channel devoted to World War II.
Which is
Yeah,
amazing
Wow.
because World War II lasted 6 years, and you can make a 24-hour network.
pretty much, yeah.
Based on
I mean, it wasn't
those 6
completely,
years.
I exaggerate, but for all intents and purposes, a lot of World War
Sometimes they threw in World War One.
II. Very rarely. Very rarely.
Nobody even knows what happened in World War I unless you're
Not
a real
much,
buff.
and that's part of the problem with World War One.
only 19 million people died.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so is that your favorite time period then? Is World War II or?
I know quite a bit about a lot of periods. I know a lot about American history, so I start with kind of American Revolution forward. I would say I probably don't know much about the antebellum period, which was also the time of Manifest Destiny when we expanded west. And then
Yeah.
kind of Reconstruction forward, the American Industrial Revolution I know quite a bit about.
Okay. That's cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yep.
I don't.
No? All right, that's fair.
I suppose that is what my dad.
Why are you on this
I'm
episode? Get
I'm
off
here
that.
for the subjective questions.
That's fair.
right. Well, I don't know if we're going to do Jeopardy on this episode.
No,
in particular.
exactly. I'm actually a big fan of history myself. I love to.
Yeah, we didn't
love to
ask
read
you. I'm sorry.
it. That's
do you
fine.
like
That's fine. I'm
history?
just going to offer anyway.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I do. I would be more of probably ancient Rome would be my wheelhouse.
You are that TikTok, trend meme. Are you
how
familiar with it?
how often do men think about ancient Rome?
About the Roman
About
Empire.
2-3 times a week. Yeah.
Right, yeah. I mean, to be fair, we do have a book or a letter in our great book that is the letter to the Romans. So,
Well, for me, one of the things that sparked it, and this is totally like tooting my own horn, so you won't be the only
All
one. But I had the blessing of writing and releasing a book not too long ago, probably 4 years ago, about ancient Rome, one of some of the early ancient Roman saints. And so I
Is
did
it the one with the blue cover?
It is the one with the blue cover. Yeah,
Okay,
it's called The Shores of
That's
Heaven.
as much as I know
You can
about
find
it,
it on-
despite owning it.
You can find. So have you never read it?
No. I own a lot of books I haven't read, though.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's
I'm
I
in the
don't
Scott Hahn.
feel.
I'm in the Scott Hahn kind of category of people where you just accumulate books just for the sake of having them.
Yeah.
Although I don't have.
There's a
like
certain
7,000 books or
vanity in
something.
that, but anyway. No, but I had to do like hundreds of
Okay, I'll throw away half of my 100 books.
Just give some to me.
I'll give you yours back. No,
That's
that's mean.
That's fine. I'll resell it. That's fine with me. I'll
Anyway,
make more
go
money.
on. So what about this
But
book?
anyway, so I ended up having to do like hundreds of hours of research into ancient Rome to make it realistic and find out more about the life of the saint who was Saint Pancras, one of my favorites, and Saints Nereus and Achilles, who were very obscure figures, but their story is really fascinating in its very nutshell form. But just learning about ancient Rome really kind of made me love it. I lived there too for a year, and so you're living in a glut of history. I mean, I remember one day in particular, so I went to the North American College, and you would live at the North American College, but take classes at one of the universities in town. So I took classes at the Gregorian University, and all the classes were in Italian. You'd go in there, there'd be like 150 to 200 people in the room, and the professor would be just reading notes, just literally not lifting their eyes off the paper for 45 minutes, and that's your class. So really, like, you didn't learn a whole lot. It was, in Italian, so I'm really struggling here. So there'd be days that I'm like, you know what? I'm just not going to class today because I want to learn something. Kind of ironic, right? So, but it was interesting because I would take these day trips from Rome to Tivoli or to Ostia, and Ostia has like one of the best preserved ancient Roman ruins. And Tivoli is the same thing. Tivoli has Hadrian's palace, where first, second century emperor had his giant palace, and so just walking around there and trying to translate the different signs, like, oh, this is what this was and this is what that was. For me, it was really, really fascinating to kind of walk the places where history happened.
Yeah.
To live in it, live through it.
Total sidebar. Have you ever been to the Holy Land?
I have not.
I have.
You have.
I have.
So what was
Have
that
you?
experience? No, I haven't.
Oh,
I haven't.
okay.
But in terms of
Living history.
walking where history happened.
Yeah, I mean,
you know?
it's Rome to another level, I would say.
Right.
I think Rome is a big commercial city as well. A lot of tourists and stuff, and and so it has that feel too, especially in the summer, which is like just disgusting. I think
hot and sticky.
it's just it's kind of hot and sticky, and a lot of American tourists, including me. But the Holy Land is a whole different ballgame. I think you really feel the history because part of the Holy Land is like first world and in modern terms, and part of the Holy Land is third world.
Really?
When you cross into Palestine, like especially Bethlehem, you really feel it. So you really feel that it's a different place. It's not a big commercial area other than the pilgrims that are there, especially if you go up to Nazareth, which is an Arabic city. And Jerome called it the fifth gospel, and it's true. You really pick up on things. So with the story about the woman who loses a coin, you realize, well, how hard could it be to find a coin? It's like, well, you actually go and you see like, well, coins, they're iron or whatever, and they get dark over time. And then you realize all the rocks in Galilee are all this dark stone. It's like, well, if you were to drop a dirty coin on the rocks here, you wouldn't be able to find it. Or the story about the father protecting his children at night. He sleeps closest to the door, right? And you have to go. You realize that the houses are probably the size of the table we're sitting at, and all the kids would be lined up, and he would be closest to the door, so he'd have to literally climb over all of his children, so
To
you
get
really
the
start
bread, yeah.
to get the bread. Yeah. So like you start to really put in context all these things. And of course you can walk Via Crucis, you walk that, you're at the point of Christ, the Annunciation, you're at the point of his death and resurrection. I mean, it's just
Right.
you're there, and it's just a whole different thing.
Well, that's good to hear that there are places still like that. That's why when I lived in Rome, I was blessed to spend a month in Assisi.
Wow.
And when you're in Assisi,
Was that your Italian lessons?
it was my Italian lessons. Yeah, absolutely. And it was fantastic because there are some places where you feel like you're stepping back in time and you're a part of history. And Assisi is one place like that. And so a lot of cultures, I think, are becoming very homogenized in that America's kind of exporting first worldness. There's super highways everywhere, and there's internet everywhere. You see McDonald's in Bethlehem or whatever. I don't know if there was one there.
I don't know.
Definitely one in Jerusalem.
I really hope not.
Probably not serving bacon cheeseburgers. I don't know, but
no, probably not. I don't remember what fast food. There was definitely Pizza Hut. A lot of Pizza Hut.
Pizza Huts. Okay,
Yeah,
so
in Jerusalem?
all over Israel. Yeah.
There was a great
Like
song.
KFC
If you ever look it up, there's a great song by a German band called Rammstein. Who
the band is called Rammstein.
Rammstein, yeah, and their song is called America, and it's this rip on the fact that every single culture is becoming Americanized. That America is just exporting absolutely everything, TV shows and music, and so it's nice when you can find a little place where you are stepping back in time, where you get a sense of the culture of a place,
yeah,
and not just America West or East,
right,
whatever.
2 years ago, I spent a few nights in Assisi, and it's just so nice there. It's quiet.
It is quiet.
It's peaceful.
The
sunsets are great.
Yeah.
You go pray Vespers with the friars. It's just really special.
That is cool. That is cool.
It's public. It's open to the public.
So
I recommend it.
Let's talk more about history because, we're really kind of trying to steep ourselves in history. So do you believe that history has an overarching story? Because when I was certainly in high school, history seemed like it was this battle and this king and this battle and this king. And it was just this constant warring over territory. And that's what history was. And that was kind of, for me, a little bit dry. Why do I need to know about Charles the Bald? Was it? How does it impact my life? But does history have an overarching story, or is it just a random sequential of events? I think I made sequential up. That's my new word.
Sequential.
Yeah,
sequential.
I like it.
Chronology.
Yeah. I would say yes, right? And I'm actually just going to anticipate one of the other questions you emailed me beforehand, which is, I think that yeah, we prepare. I think
who knew?
I have a thing printed out.
One half of one page.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, I think that the way that you see that you can connect the dots in history and see a story is really ideological. Right, I think it really has to do with the philosophies that are prevalent at a certain time and how those connect to other philosophies. And the thing is, that's intrinsically connected to concrete events. But I at least believe that it's either, I was going to say more noticeable, but I think more than anything, and maybe this is just because I live in 21st century America, I think that the more impactful way that you see the story of history is through philosophies. And that could be because we live in an age of secularism, so it's like this is a particularly dangerous philosophy for Christians, and you can trace it back through history, So
I think I definitely agree, and I think that there is an arc to history, but I think it doesn't actually end, right? It keeps going, but I think the way that I've always seen it, and the way why I've been interested in it is because it really puts yourself in perspective. Right. I think at least one thing that we can think of is, we can go back. We know that kind of God created everything and that's the beginning of history, so to speak. And it's like beginning before history. Right. But we can also look at ourselves in a very concrete way and say, we are in this place right now. And if you start tracing back to how I got to where I am now, and you start going back to even just your parents and your grandparents, your great-grandparents, you look at where they're from and how that ended up being in a place. If you actually think about it in terms of family and in terms of geography, all of a sudden you see the story coming together, which culminates in you. Yeah. Which is really special, right? Right.
I think people who are like doing Ancestry.com and things like that have a unique insight and perhaps, I don't know, a longing in the heart to know where we came from. I've never done it. I've never really felt the need to search out my genealogy.
I don't want them to sell my information or anything.
Yeah, that's.
I haven't done it. Yeah, I haven't done the DNA thing.
But a lot of people are very fascinated by their genealogy, perhaps because they want to know what part of the story they fit into more and more.
Yeah. And so if you think about history as actually the story of you or your family or whatever, then all of a sudden it starts to it starts to really resonate, I think. And so I had a couple of history teachers throughout my, which really inspired me because they would always do that. They would always put it in context of where we are now and where we've come from. I also went to Catholic school, so you could always put it in the context of the history of the church or in the history of the development of theology or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, how far back can you trace your family lineage?
Oh, not particularly
4
far.
generations, maybe.
Yeah.
Oh, that's it, really?
Yeah, back to Sicily.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I stumbled upon a book in the Hartford Library, Hartford Public Library, the Book of the Gills. It was
No
called.
way.
Traced
Is
back
that
to-
you? Is
Yeah,
that
it
your family?
was. It was my family. Traced it back to
Wow.
1614, which I was like,
Whoa.
kind of blew my mind a little
That's
bit. Like,
cool.
in
whoa,
this,
that's-
and they're all from this country.
Were there any previous
no,
clerics?
no, they were not from this country. They traced it back to the old country, which was Alsace-Lorraine,
Oh, wow.
French Germany area.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were no clerics, not in my lineage, because
Okay.
you
I
can't, be
was-
married to be a priest. so-
Oh, well, I guess I meant like.
No, there was no
you know,
there's no
you-
evidence that I had seen of a,
Yeah,
a cleric.
I definitely didn't mean your great grandfather. But I always think about that because I guess I mean it's just an idea, right? That our ancestors who are hopefully saints are probably interceding for us, So that's why I was curious.
Well, I say mass for my ancestors regularly.
Yeah.
To remember them at the altar.
Really, that's awesome.
But
That's
it
awesome.
actually does make me pause when I consider that, the fact that I've chosen to be celibate
Mhm.
for my life, because I realize I'm not going to start a lineage.
Right.
I'm not going to have that 300 years from now. People are not going to look up my name as their great-great-great-grandfather.
Yeah.
Mm.
And it's kind of like, oof, For me, that's been something to wrap my head around, because
Yeah.
I think in every person's heart, particularly men, I think,
Hmm.
we have a desire to leave a legacy.
Is that why some people want to be bishops, perhaps? Because they can ordain men? Which
Oh, I
then
don't
some of
know.
them might become bishops. And then there's like that one bishop that was in Italy that like is ordained. Like you could probably trace your ordination back to him at some point.
I'm sure at some point,
Yeah. There's
Yeah.
a couple of like pivotal bishops that have like
Hmm.
ordained an incredible number of men.
Well, I've considered that in maybe not an ordination, but in terms of passing on the faith.
Yeah.
Joe, who's our co-host, he had a conversion through my confirmation class when I was a young priest or deacon, really. And for me, that's kind of like, okay, he's my spiritual son.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In that sense, like, all right,
Yeah, I mean, we do call you father,
Yeah.
I mean, there
Yeah.
is some truth to spiritual children.
Mm.
I guess I just mean I don't think that's just semantics.
No,
I
absolutely.
really do
think
believe
there's-
that. So
There's
Yeah.
a reality there.
Yeah, but I do think that history is the whole reason why I think that we have been given the gift of history is really to trace back our faith,
Mm,
right? I think that's the story, right? The overarching story of the history of the world is the story of Jesus Christ.
yeah.
Whether or not
Right.
you believe it or not, sorry, like that is
Well, just even
that
the
is-
dates that we use, 2024, means it's
Well, yeah.
2024 years after the birth
Right.
of Christ.
right. Well, yeah,
The
yeah. That
pivotal moment.
aside, I mean, it doesn't. That's not a cause for Christianity
No, but
necessarily.
I know what you're saying.
it's
though.
not.
But I think the
Yeah.
whole story when we say like what's the history of the world, well, the pivotal moment is death of Christ on the cross. That is
Right.
the pivotal moment for the entire world.
Right.
And actually is.
Which is
like it actually it is in a theological sense for our salvation, but it also is also in the history of the world from a global perspective. That is
Right.
the pivotal moment.
And that's a really bold claim. You think about it. I mean, like, you think of all the people that have ever lived and died. They estimate about 100 billion people that have lived and died in human history.
Yeah.
And that doesn't count the people that perhaps, died from miscarriage. So maybe 200 billion people
Right.
Mm.
in human history have ever existed. And we're claiming that on one backwater hill, one event for 3 hours in an afternoon is the very crux of everything.
The crux. The cross.
The cross,
Yeah,
right? The cross.
This is true.
The cross
you know?
is the pivotal point of human history, yeah.
And it is. Like whether you don't even have to be a Christian to acknowledge that.
Because I think if you don't acknowledge that, then history is meaningless.
Yeah.
Because it's cyclical, right? I mean, civilizations rise and fall, kings come and go, and what's the point? It's, as Shakespeare said, sound and fury signifying nothing, right?
Right.
Well, it's incredible. You talked about you like to study the ancient Roman Empire, probably Roman Republic too, to some extent, or do you
Yeah.
really focus on the empire? They're two different.
I mean, yeah, they're two different things, but yeah, ancient Rome, period.
Ancient Rome period.
Just period.
Okay. That's
gonna-
actually what
I'm
you
not-
said.
I'm not gonna parse.
I'm just putting words in your mouth.
I'm not gonna
which is
parse,
one of my
uh,
specialties. No,
I
I
would
would
put water in my mouth right now.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, we all have water. This isn't coffee, unfortunately. But I was trying to say something which was more ingenious than talking about water in a cup.
Ancient Rome, pagan.
Right.
But-
So we do see that part of we talk about kings and everything like that. Well, the early history of probably the first 800 years after Christ, we do see that there was essentially a revolution going on, or probably more of an evolution, especially with the Benedictine monasteries that popped up everywhere. But we do see that the Christianity starting to shape the world slowly, sometimes quickly,
sure.
in little sprints. It's kind of like little sprints that happen over a long period of time, which completely shaped the way all of Europe and then the world functions.
Yes, but
But.
and this has always been my issue with Catholic and Christian historians is that we're so Eurocentric, right? It didn't shape China. I don't think Christianity has shaped China very much. You know, they're kind of an entity unto themselves, or Japan, or African history, or South American history, right? I mean, we've had Incans and Mayans and Aztecs come and go, and really Christianity was not.
Well, Northern Africa.
No, but you have to look like from the point of the cross, right, in 30 AD or 33 AD, whatever the historians say.
Yeah.
To the present, you do have all of South America pretty much being Christian. I mean, it's changing now, right? You do have that China, although itself, in Japan too, right? They martyred all the martyrs, right? Even though that they aren't necessarily the most Christian nations, they have to contend with the West.
Yeah.
Which has been shaped by Christianity. And Africa was, of course, in the 1800s, like in late 1700s, was divided up with all the different European powers. And
for better and for worse.
You know, has a large Christian presence, right? Yeah. So, but I would say that, you know, all of that was put in motion.
Because of Christianity.
Yeah,
absolutely. The conversions, without a doubt, and the missionary efforts. But it's just interesting to me how, as Christians, so often we focus on history being European history,
right,
and just forget that there's 6 other continents that had their own histories that were very legitimate. But that begs the question, right? If history is God's story unfolding, there's large portions of history, many large portions of history, where people didn't hear the gospel. It's centuries, millennia, you know?
Right, but I mean, just to pull a biblical example, right? So you've got the 3 magi that come from the east, you know, and they are not Jews, you know, so like. So, now I'm not suggesting that the texts that they studied that led them via the star to Christ were necessarily inspired. You know what I mean? Because I don't know if they were in a position where they had access to Old Testament texts and were studying that even in a non-Jewish manner. You know what I mean? But the point is that God worked through those 3 Gentiles, you know, and so when you're looking at the story of history, I mean, it's called salvation history because it's salvation breaking into the world, and God utilized non-Jews prior to Christ. Obviously, there's the unfolding of Christianity, like Paul said, but I don't know, it wasn't exclusive to.
Well, even St. Paul talks about that in his, you know, when he got up in Athens in Acts 15, I think it was 15.
I don't know.
You've got the Bible, but anyway,
I'm not going to break it open.
You know, and the Second Vatican Council calls those seeds of the word, like preparations in a culture for the gospel. And I don't know if you've ever heard of the Chinese rites controversy. It was one of the most interesting scenes in history is that Matteo Ricci was a Jesuit who first really successfully evangelized China, and he was so wildly successful by trying to enculturate the gospel. He started dressing as a Chinese man and mastered the language.
I have heard of this.
You know, and he was doing great work. And the big controversy is, can you use the Tianzhan, which was the Chinese word for the Great Spirit, as God? And they wrote to the Vatican, and the Vatican said, nope, you can't. You got to use Deus, Latin. Because of that, China is not Catholic. China would have been Catholic. I mean, he was making conversions left and right. Everyone was like totally on board with this. And then because they were unwilling to enculturate, it was a huge loss.
Do we know what the essence of the word was? Like, do we know that if it was exclusive to any Christian doctrine? Like, I don't, like, for example, right? Like with Mormonism, right? We don't acknowledge Mormon baptism. That's because they essentially believe in tritheism,
right,
as opposed to monotheism in a trinity,
right?
Do we know if that played a role there?
I don't know. I do know that they worship their ancestors, and so that was part of it too. Is that they wanted to say, well, it's not worship; it's just honoring the dead. You know, it's not worship,
right?
And that was a little gray, area too.
Gray area between some weird kind of, I guess, pantheism and communion of saints.
Yeah. So
anyway,
but anyway, so history is very messy.
Yeah,
and so that's the challenge. So you know, we're saying this is the unfolding of God's story, but do you think then that there's a certain determinism in history that is God guiding the course of human events, or do we have a freedom in it? or both, or neither?
I
or-
think both. I mean, he's revving up.
No, I'm thinking about the question. Well, we do have free will,
Yeah,
right? So we do have free will.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely, individuals. But-
and providence exists. So
yeah.
Well, I mean, it's always that's the eternal debate, right? Is how much is God influencing things versus us being able to determine on our own?
Right.
Because he knows what we're going
Right.
to do, but we don't.
I mean, I think of like the Battle of Lepanto.
mhm.
Yeah.
You know, this great story. If you're not familiar with it, listeners, go look it up. It's where the Muslim forces, which were like twice or three times larger than the Christian forces, were about to fight just off the coast of Italy in Lepanto. And at the time, this was 1517, I believe. At the time, if the Muslims had won, Italy would have fallen to the Muslims, and Christianity might be wiped out, perhaps in the entire in all of Europe. So this was a critical battle on which hinged all of Europe's Christianity. And apparently there was no way the Christians should have won, but the wind changed at the last minute, helping the Christian forces, and the Christian forces overran. So clearly, I mean, most people think that was an intervention from God, in large
Right.
part because it was the Pope that invited everyone to pray the Rosary for that success. And that's where Our Lady of the Rosary comes from, was that success of that battle. So God intervened at that moment.
Yeah. Yes, he did.
Yeah.
But I don't know if we can point out to other points where God intervened, or
Well, I mean, the thing is, it doesn't even have to be these massive moments in history, right? Like, so yeah, we have free will, and you can't deny that. I believe you can't deny that and really maintain the essence of Christianity,
I
which is
agree,
that
yeah,
we're
we
called
have
to
to.
love, and we can only love if we have free will, right?
Yeah, amen.
But God has to be quote unquote intervening in history because he knows every hair on your head. You know what I mean? And so it's like, and he cares for you,
Yeah.
right? So it has to be both of these things are true. One of the ways that I've heard it explained is it's basically how do we interact with grace? You know, so like, we have the ability to reject grace. And so when it comes to, so for example, I guess that battle, right? God willed to intervene through those people praying the rosary. And had they chosen to not intervene, that would have had a real impact. The thing is, God foresees that because God's outside of time. You know, so there is like that still mysterious element to it.
Yeah.
But the way that we can actually interact with grace, choosing to cooperate with it or choosing not to cooperate with it, I think is the element of free will interacting with the eternity of God.
Yeah. That's a deep
Yeah.
way of putting it.
Boom. Pretty sure it was Father Gregory Pine. Just to be clear. But
Yeah.
Good.
not me. So
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well said.
Well, we were actually running out of time. So we're
Wow,
gonna continue,
already?
Yeah, we're going to
Okay.
continue this discussion on a future episode, talking more about history and our place in it, because we have to figure out where are we going as a nation, as a culture. Have we seen any philosophical trends that we can find the roots in history, and where we, what is our role to play in the unfolding of God's majestic plan throughout human history? Thank you for joining us on Veritas Catholic Network, 1350 AM and 103.9 FM. You can get your mugs right here on veritascatholic.com. Can you? I don't know.
yes, you can.
Okay.
T-shirts as well.
T-shirts and other Veritas swag, but find us on YouTube, the radio, podcasts, and wherever else you get your information
and entertainment.
Good day, everybody.
and entertainment. Have a great day. God bless.